If you're in your 40s, think about your finances for a second. Do you actually know where you stand financially? Like, not a rough idea? Do you actually know? Because most people in their 40s think they're doing okay. They've got a job, they've got a 401k, maybe they even have a home, and that feels like enough. But when you look at the real numbers, the actual data on what people in their 40s have saved, how much debt they're carrying, and how many are on track to retire comfortably, it tells a very different story. Today, we're going through 10 money stats for people in their 40s in 2026, and I'll be straight with you. Some of these are going to sting a little. But stick around for stat number 10 because that one stat alone explains why so many people in their 40s end up with over $500,000 less in retirement than they should have. Welcome back to Stickman Money. I'm your former Wall Street professional and self-made multimillionaire. This channel is all about the cash, compounding, assets, savings, and high income strategies. I post personal finance content every week. So if you're new here, subscribe. All right, let's get into it. So the first stat I want to talk about is net worth, and specifically why the number you probably heard thrown around is almost useless. You'll see headlines saying the average net worth for someone in their 40s is close to $1 million. And people hear that and either feel great about themselves or feel totally defeated. But that number means almost nothing. A handful of billionaires completely skew it. The median net worth, which is what most people actually look like, is somewhere around 130 to 150,000 for people in their early to mid 40s. Now that's still a real number, and if you're above it, genuinely, you're doing better than most people around you. But think about what $150,000 actually represents after 20 plus years of working. For most people, that's not nearly enough runway to retire on. The benchmark that financial planners typically use is about 3 times your annual salary by age 40. So if you're making 100 grand, you should be sitting on $300,000 by now. And the median person isn't close to that. So if you're measuring yourself against some inflated average you saw online, don't. Look at the median. It's a much more honest picture. This one generally caught me off guard when I first looked at it. Close to 45% of people in their 40s have less than $25,000 saved for retirement. And I want to be clear, that's not 250,000, that's 25,000. Like maybe 1 year of modest life expenses. What's wild is that this isn't just people struggling on low incomes. I've seen this firsthand with people I know personally, people pulling in good salaries who just never made retirement savings a priority. Every raise went towards a nicer lifestyle, not towards the future. If you are not in this group, that's generally something to feel good about. But don't let that turn into complacency because the 40s are exactly when the compounding math starts to punish you hard for falling behind. The average 401k balance for someone in their 40s right now is around 130,000. 6 figures. Sounds decent on the surface. But if you're earning $100,000 a year, the target by age 40 is $300,000 in retirement savings and closer to $600,000 by the time you hit 50s. The average person is less than half where they should be, and the gap only gets harder to close as time goes on. I think the problem is that people see $130,000 and feel relieved, but that number isn't giving you any context about what you actually need. And the cruel part about retirement savings is that the longer you wait to close the gap, the more it costs you. Not linearly, but exponentially. That's just how compounding works in reverse. The average person in the 40s is carrying over $26,000 in non-mortgage consumer debt. Credit cards, car loans, student loans that somehow never went away. All of it. And look, I don't have a major problem with all debt. A reasonable mortgage or student loan at a low rate is manageable. What I do have a problem with is credit card debt sitting at 20-something% interest. That's not just a financial setback, it's actively working against you every single day. I've talked about this before on the channel, but this is what I call negative compounding. Most people focus on compounding as this amazing wealth building force, and it is. But high interest debt does the exact same thing in the opposite direction. It quietly destroys wealth over time And most people are so used to carrying it that they've stopped noticing how much it's costing them. If you're in your 40s and you're still carrying credit card debt, getting rid of it isn't optional. It's the first move. More than half of Americans, somewhere around 57%, say they're living paycheck to paycheck. And your 40s are not immune to this. What's uncomfortable about this stat is that it's not just a low income problem. I know people making $200,000 to $250,000 a year who have essentially nothing left at the end of the month. And it's not because they're bad with money in some obvious way. It's because their lifestyle scaled right alongside their income every single time. That's the lifestyle inflation trap, and it's especially dangerous for high earners in their 40s because the spending looks totally justified. Of course, you have a nice house. You work for 20 years. Of course, you drive a good car. Of course, you go on real vacations now. None of those things are wrong on their own. But if your savings rate today is the same as it was when you were making half as much, you've got a problem. Because at this point in life, what you keep matters a lot more than what you earn. Only about 1/3 of people in their 40s have an investment outside of their workplace retirement plan. That means the majority of people in their 40s are completely dependent on their 401k, an account that they can't touch for another 15 to 20 years, with contribution limits, limited investment options, and no flexibility. Now, to be fair, maxing out your 401k is a great start, but if that's the only thing you're doing, you're leaving a lot on the table. The people I've seen build serious wealth in their 40s aren't doing anything exotic. They're maxing out their 401ks, they've got a backdoor Roth going, they have a taxable brokerage account building in the background, and often a piece of real estate on top of that. It's not complicated, but it does require getting off the idea that one account is a complete plan. The data shows that household incomes typically peak between ages 45 and 54. So if you're in the 40s right now, you are statistically in your highest earning years. And I think most people know this intuitively, but what actually happens with that peak income? For a lot of people, honestly, most people, it goes straight into a bigger lifestyle. I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy your money, but there's a real difference between enjoying your money and letting peak income years pass without meaningfully accelerating your wealth. Because this window doesn't last forever. Your 50s come quickly, and by then, you want assets working for you, not just a salary. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing about income, it would be this: don't match your spending to your earning. Every raise is an opportunity to build, not an excuse to upgrade. The average credit score for people in the 40s sits around 714, which is fine, but it's not great. And the reason this matters more in your 40s than it did before is that you're probably dealing with bigger financial decisions now. Buying investment properties, refinancing your mortgage, potentially business credit. At this scale, a mediocre credit score costs real money. The difference between a 714 and a 780 plus on a $500,000 mortgage can easily mean $200 to $400 extra per month. Run that over 30 years, and you're looking at well over $100,000 in additional interest just because you never actively managed your credit profile. Most people treat their credit score like a report card that just happens to them. The people building wealth treat it like a tool they actively maintain. It's a small shift in mindset with a surprisingly large financial impact. I want to spend a second on this one because I think a lot of people in their 40s carrying this quiet frustration that they're not as far as ahead as their parents seem to be at the same age. And I want to validate that because the data backs it up. Home prices in many markets have gone up 40% or more just since 2020. The cost of living has genuinely reset, and real wages adjusted for inflation haven't kept pace for most workers. So if your parents bought their first home in their late 20s and told you to just do the same thing they did, the math doesn't work anymore. It is a completely different environment. But I'll say this: knowing it's harder is not an excuse to be less strategic. If anything, it means you have to be more deliberate about every financial decision you make, because the margin for error is smaller than it was for the generation before you. This is the one I told you to stick around for. Take two people, same income, same investments, same rate of return. Person A starts putting away $1,000 a month at 40, but person B waits until 45 to start. By the time they both reach retirement at age 65, the difference in wealth between the two people is over $500,000. 5 years of waiting, and that's it. That's a $500,000 decision. So what makes this so serious in your 40s specifically is that this is not like being in your 20s or early 30s where you have 4 decades of runway to course correct. The compounding math gets less forgiving every year you wait. Time used to be your biggest asset. In your 40s, it starts becoming your biggest constraint. I think about this with my own investing journey. Years where I wasn't maximizing contributions or periods where I kept meaning to set something up and just didn't get around to it. You don't feel these decisions in the moment. You feel them 20 years later when you look at what the account balance could have been. Don't be that person. So let's be real about what the average person in their 40s looks like right now. Median net worth around $150,000, still carrying consumer debt, less than $130,000 saved for retirement, living paycheck to paycheck despite earning more than they ever have. That's average, and average in your 40s is genuinely risky because you don't have another 30 years to fix it. But here's what I want to leave you with. The gap between where the average person is and where you could be is still very closable, but only if you move with intention right now. So a few things to actually do after this video. Get your real net worth number, not a rough estimate, the actual number. If you want help tracking it, I built a free personal finance tracker and I give it away to everyone on my newsletter. You can grab it at stickmanmoney.com. Link is in the description below. If you're carrying high interest debt, that is your number one priority. Not investing, not saving for a vacation. Eliminating the debt that's working against you every single day. Max every tax advantage account you have access to and then build beyond it. And stop letting income growth translate automatically into lifestyle growth. That is the trap that keeps high earners stuck. The people who look back at their 40s with financial confidence didn't necessarily earn more than everybody else. They just made better decisions during the years that mattered most. You're still in those years. All right, thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, subscribe. I put out personal finance videos every week. I'm Stickman Money, your former Wall Street professional and self-made multimillionaire, and this channel is all about the cash, compounding, assets, savings, and high income strategies. And drop a comment below. Which stat hit you the hardest? And if you like this one, here's the video I did on maxing out a 401k for just 10 years. In your 20s is actually one of the easiest ways to become a multimillionaire. And this video showing how you stack up financially against your peers.